And so we look at how children in 2007 suffer. We look at how children in 2007 are exploited, and it's overwhelming for me. I can't imagine. 11 million children will die this year before they turn 5 years old. I can't imagine that. I really can't. I have no concept for what 11 million kids means. So Phileena took these numbers and she compared them to the populations of countries. And she said, these are nations of children. 11 million children, that's the population of Cuba. 14 million children will starve to death this year. That's the population of Chile. Over 200,000 kids will go blind this year because they don't have enough vitamin A in their diet. That's the population of French Guiana. There's nearly 300 million child laborers in the world. It's the population of the U.S. There's over 140 million children growing up without access to education. That means, when I say they don't have access to education, that doesn't mean they're not in school. That means even if they wanted to go to school, they couldn't because there are no schools for them in their communities where they live. They have no access to it. That's the population of Pakistan. In 2007, there's over 100 million children that live or work on the streets, right? Street kids. It's comparable to the population of Mexico. There's over 25 million child refugees. That's the population of Afghanistan. And that's more than half of refugees all worldwide. In 2007, there are over 10 million children caught up in the commercial sex industry. That means child prostitution, child pornography, sex tourism. That's the population of Portugal. There's over 300,000 children serving as soldiers in armed forces, if it's militias or rebels or even government forces. That's the population of the Bahamas. There's over 3 million children that will get AIDS each year. That's the population of Liberia. There's over 25 million children who've already been orphaned because of AIDS. That's the population of Uganda. And there's already 5 million children that have died because of AIDS, and that's the population of Nicaragua. Okay, I'm already lost. I'm already buried under that. That's too much for me. It's 11:20 change in the morning, and I can't even wrap my mind around this. But if we put a map up there, and we highlighted Cuba and Chile and French Guiana, the U.S. and Pakistan and Mexico, Afghanistan, Portugal, the Bahamas, Liberia, Uganda, and Nicaragua, that would be stunning. It should be troubling. Because you know what? Every single one of those kids, if they're not our brother and sisters, are at least our neighbors. And because of that, there are theological demands for how we respond to the situation they're in. Nations of children. He centered the child. He made the child become the example, the focal point. If we want to be great, we have to humble ourselves. We have to look like this. And in 2007, childhood has become a commodity and has become something that is incredibly vulnerable. And as Christians, we have to make sense of that. As Christians, we have to have answers for that. Right? There's 3 things, and we'll talk more about these, especially tonight, but sort of throughout the week, because of this reality. This is an assault on the character of God. Y'all, He says He's good. He says He loves the poor. He says He provides for the hungry. And I imagine there are nations of children who beg to differ, and they have a legitimate reason to. And so it is an assault on His character. When we see this kind of suffering, this kind of oppression, this kind of dehumanizing humiliation, there's a problem. This also points to the need of the validity of the Christian virtue of worshiping communities like ours. God uses the poor to validate and authenticate the quality of our Christian virtue. And when nations of children suffer, what does that say about us? Thirdly, God uses the poor as a standard for judgment. And we'll dig into the scriptures tonight and we'll sort of unpack what that means. But if God uses the poor as a standard for judgment, then what do these children have to say to us, about us, for us? These are questions that we have to have answers for. And we have to have relevant answers for. And you know, I hate to see the church not having the imagination to respond. I hate to see Christians sort of throwing charity almost in a degrading and paternal, patriarchal, parochial manner. Could we not have the imagination to let our worship create transformation. If we're transformed people, then God will use us to transform the world. I know that. I believe that. And that doesn't mean you have to move to India. And that doesn't mean that you have to work with child prostitutes. That starts now. It starts today. It's things that you can do here on campus. It's decisions that you make. It's lifestyle choices. It's how you celebrate and cultivate your spirituality.